All right, what's going on, everybody? It's been this long, and we have never had an Avalanche and Maple Leafs crossover, and that ends today. We're doing it. Avalanche and Leafs facing off Wednesday night. So we got David Morassutti here with us. New episode of Locked On Avalanche and Locked On Leafs starting right now.
You're Locked On Avalanche, your daily podcast on the Colorado Avalanche. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, everybody, welcome to another special episode crossover of Locked On Avalanche and Locked On Leafs. From Locked On Avalanche, I am Chris Maselli. With me, as always, is Mr. Shaggy Von Doom, Kyle Sullivan, and joining us from Locked On Leafs, David Morassutti. What took us so long, boys?
I don't know. I always like to watch your show. I will say, out of all,
Thank you.
A lot of teams in the NHL, but there's quite a few I like to keep an eye on. The Avalanche were one of them, especially when you guys were in the Stanley Cup finals. So a little envious watching on our part there, I will say.
What did we have your rooting interest? Were you on our side for that Cup final?
Yeah, we did not want to see the Tampa Bay Lightning win another cup. It was we were due for change in the NHL. So yes, we were very much in line with the Avalanche.
All right. Well, we'll get to the predictions of this game later. Throw around could this be a Stanley Cup final and all that stuff. I love talking about that stuff. But let's start with this game. I always love going up against the Maple Leafs, and I have like a soft spot for them. I like to see them do well. I am not one of those hockey fans that hates on the Maple Leafs. I am of the belief like the league is better when the Maple Leafs are in the thick of things, and they clearly are. You have your first round issues, which, I won't bring that stuff up because I'm sure you've talked about that over and over again. But when it comes to this game, where are the Maple Leafs at right now? We'll get to the trade deadline next segment. But they're coming off the loss to Buffalo. Avalanche coming off a pretty convincing win over the Canadiens of all teams, but that's neither here nor there. Where is Toronto heading into this game with the Avalanche?
Guys, have you ever had a team pretty much have their spot in the division locked up in November? That's kind of where the Leafs are right now. They have been stuck second in the Atlantic Division since November. And if you ask a lot of Leafs fans, they pretty much are just like, we're waiting for the playoffs because second place, third place, whatever it is, that's what everyone is expecting. That's what everyone's expecting, that Leafs Lightning first round. So it feels like right now it's a crawl to the playoffs right now. The Leafs making all these moves at the deadline. They're working in a bunch of new guys. Ryan O'Reilly gets hurt, and you guys know a lot about Ryan O'Reilly over there. Mm-hmm. And it's been a very weird time. It's been a lot of, I would call it the experimenting period with Sheldon Keefe and this lineup. Obviously, the loss in the Sabres, it was another game of the 11 forward, 7 defensemen experiment that the Leafs have not really done far too often. Again, copying the Lightning for some strange reason in that regard. But Sheldon Keefe is just trying to keep as many guys fresh, especially on the back end. Leafs have 8-9 defensemen that they could play on any given night. Unfortunately, you can't play that main defenseman in the NHL. The most usually teams will try to do is 7. Funny enough, there's been like throw around of, do Leafs put up and line up with 8 defensemen out there? And I'm just like, no. 11-7 is radical enough. But yeah, it's been just a bit of a just trying to get guys into a bit of a rhythm, or just trying to get guys fresh. Matt Murray is just 3 games back from his long injury stint, one of his many of the season. So it's just been a weird period where guys are trying to gel together. So many lineup changes have been made, and getting ready to play the Tampa Bay Lightning. It's been
that's been the team since November, right? Yeah. That's what everybody's heading for.
That's what people have hated about this. That's why the biggest proponents of about changing the playoff format have been those in the Atlantic Division, because it's likely going to be this way for a little bit. Wow. And funny enough, if you went with the traditional 1v8 format, yeah, Leafs and Lightning still play each other. And a lot of like the changes in the standings, most likely Leafs Lightning play each other. So it's just these guys are married to play with each other. It's we're just waiting for it. We're not even going to mention any other teams in first round matchup potentials. It's already a month long. Going to be a month long preview for that series.
And that was something I was very curious about, because last year on the Avalanche Cup run, we kind of considered the last 20 games quote unquote garbage time. Like everything's locked up. You're just ready to get there and flip that switch. It's playoff mode. For the Leafs to be there since, you said, practically November. And we know the first round thing. We get it. How worried are Leaf fans with being in this kind of cruise control autopilot for so long, knowing your opponent in and out? You're watching your opponent night in, night out. How worried are you about flipping that switch and taking that momentum into the playoffs? You've been playing at a consistent level for so long, and you're dropping games to Buffalo, and you're having your great games and you're not so great. Do you feel like the Leafs can make that step up when you get to that point?
If you ask a lot of Leafs fans, they don't really feel that way after watching what Tampa did to them last year. It's a weird kind of period for this team because, yeah, they're going to have to eventually flip a switch at some point. I guess the one thing that they do have that they can still play for is that home ice advantage. That was kind of the big thing for them in that final stretch last year, was just making sure you finish second and you give yourself as good of a chance to beat Tampa in that first round, which means getting that first that home ice in the first round. It's really tough because, yeah, last year kind of felt that way. Austin Matthews individually had something to play for when he was trying to get to 60 goals and trying to set those records. So there was a bit of like that to watch. This year, yeah, like it just feels like when you see a typical Leafs loss, which is you play a team that lower in the standings. All right, this is a good chance to establish your dominance, what you are as an NHL team, and then you blow a lead to the Sabres and you allow them to score 4 unanswered goals, or you lose to the Arizona Coyotes. Like I had Nick Alberga on. He does another Leaf show, and he's just like, these games mean nothing in the grand scheme of things. They really don't mean much, but because of where the Leafs are right now, everything is being under such a microscope, and we know the microscope in Toronto is not small; it is massive. And that's what makes it tough, is that there's really not that much to play for. There's not any player that's trying to establish, an NHL record of any sort or anything like that. So right now, the only thing the Leafs have going for them is they have this period to experiment with the new guys that they brought in and do those sort of things. So there is that thought process there. They're not under as much pressure to win, so they can have that time to gel, to kind of move things around and see what works and what doesn't work. That's the benefit of the situation, but that's really the only benefit of it right now.
Losing to teams that they should beat. Where have I heard that, Kyle?
Not here. Definitely not here.
What's the, going into this game, you're always looking for like weaknesses for kind of like the good teams. You know what I mean? So as for, for Colorado, they're although their power play is in the top 10 right now, and they were 3 for 3 against Montreal, but that is Montreal. Let's get real, right? The worst penalty kill in the league. Good. You went 3 for 3, but that has been up and down all year long. They like to give up leads, especially in the third period. So what is it for the Leafs? Like what's something that teams have been exploiting? And on the flip side of that, what's their strong suit? Where do they really excel?
Yeah. I mean, that Sabres game is the perfect example of what teams can exploit on the Leafs, which is in front of the net. They have lapses. They leave guys open in the slot. Their positioning isn't really there. They might take a dumb penalty or two that just allows a team to get back into a game when it looks like they're out of it. So, I mean, for Colorado with a good power play, that's something that the Leafs have done against Colorado in the past. Like, I remember there was that one home game against Colorado last year where the Leafs went up, and then Colorado they went to another gear. There was an urgency, and the Leafs couldn't match that urgency. That has been the Leafs' problem, not just against bad teams, but even good teams too. But when you have a game like the Oilers that they had 2 days ago, where the Leafs were down, There was an urgency of John Tavares, Mitch Marner, Austin Matthews, William Nylander, all deciding, okay, we're actually going to start playing to our potential now, and they were unstoppable. That's kind of where the good and the bad happens. If the Leafs can match the urgency of the other team, and it doesn't take much for them really, but once they do it all as a unit, they're hard to stop. But then when the other team kind of pours it on and nobody else from the Leafs responds, that's where they get into trouble. So if Colorado comes out with any sort of sense of urgency, especially I know that Carl has been dealing with a lot of injury issues lately, so they have a lot of, hey, I'm going to tell you right now, Dennis Malgin, I'm putting money on him to score against the Leafs because that is another MO about this team. If a former Leaf comes and plays, especially in Toronto, he is doing something against this team. And I know Dennis Malgin has been playing top 6 minutes for Colorado. So I'm looking.
Well, he hasn't been playing top 6 minutes. I won't, but he has been like
he's been top scoring. 6 numbers.
He is, yeah. But they're going to need him to play top 6 minutes now with Arturi Lehkonen out with the broken finger.
Gee, we heard that one before for the Leafs.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. But I don't, he'll get increased minutes for sure. I don't know. Maybe people are throwing around. He might be in the top 6. I don't know. I don't know what Jared Bednar's plan is. He's been putting guys up and down the lineup pretty much all year to kind of like see what works. He had Evan Rodriguez on the 4th line a week ago. Yeah. And I think the game against Arizona, he had him on the top line, or maybe maybe just the last game against Montreal, he had him on the top line to just see what's working and what's not working. So could he be on that second line? Talking about Malgin, sure. But I think it's a perfect storm for him because even if he's just been the average player, going up against your former team, you're going to get up. And he's been hot lately. So he's itching to hit the ice in this game, I feel. Definitely.
Oh, definitely. Oh, he's definitely itching. And even Evan Rodriguez, you bring his name up. He had spent a cup of coffee here in Toronto at one point, and the Leafs actually looked at trying to bring him in. So he's probably another guy that's going to try to come up big against Leafs. He's done it in the past. So it's those guys that sometimes get the Leafs in trouble. They'll focus on the McKinnons, the Rantanens, the Makars, but then it's those other guys that sort of find their way because they play a style that might be different than what the Leafs play, and it gives them fits sometimes. I will admit.
All right, you going? Go ahead.
No, him bringing up former Leafs, like that was Naz's MO every time we visited, and it's one of those things that you hope the Avalanche are deep enough, even with the injuries, that if you are taking out the Mikos and the Nates, that you will see the stepping up. That hasn't happened too much for the Avalanche in probably the past month, but this game is prime for somebody to step up that you usually don't see.
Yeah. So, all right. Let's hear from FanDuel, and then we'll get into kind of the trade season, which was night and day between these two teams. So first we got FanDuel, and we are way beyond the halfway point of the NBA season. We got the conclusion coming up of the NBA season, especially the NHL season. And of course, the NCAA tournament is here. So now's the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get that no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line, 2-point scores, and 3-pointers drained. Do you have a bracket filled out?
I do not have a bracket filled out yet, but I will try. I do. It's going to be tough. I haven't never ever gone a really good bracket before, but I think this year.
Who has?
I know. Yeah, pretty much.
Who do you think you're going with without even looking at the matchups? Do you have a favorite?
Oh, man.
You're on the spot now.
I know.
We're holding you to it.
There's so many guys, so many teams. I'm looking at the Big 12. So I'm thinking like maybe Kansas.
Can't go wrong with it. The Kansas, right?
Yeah, like Kansas, and I don't think I could do Texas. They've broken my heart before in the past.
Yeah,
it's what they do.
I'm with you on that. Yeah, I do have Kansas in the Final Four though. So
as do I.
You can take that for what it's worth, which is absolutely nothing. So, plus FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. So don't miss a chance to get your no sweat first bet for up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/locked on. That's FanDuel.com/locked on to learn more and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Kyle mentioned Nazem Kadri. I want to bring him up briefly. What's the, how do Leafs fans feel about Kadri several years removed from his time there? They still have a soft spot for him?
Oh, absolutely. The style of game that Nazem Kadri played was there. It was something that the Leafs fans didn't want to get rid of, and they never did want to get rid of Nazem Kadri. It was just a matter of the Leafs had needs. Kadri got himself suspended.
Yeah,
his second playoff in a row. It's almost like Kyle Dubas felt like he just needed to do something there. He had the luxury of having Matthews and Tavares as your top two centers. You weren't going to want to keep Nazem Kadri as a third line center or even on the wing. But if you ask a lot of Leafs fans, they feel like that was a trade that should never have been made. They should never, or at least not have been made that specific trade. They feel like a different trade should have been made. And apparently that wasn't the first choice. So Colorado kind of did get fortunate with that one. But I think a lot of Leafs fans also were just really happy to see him get the cup.
Yeah.
There was there for sure.
You don't have Barry anymore, obviously, but you still do have Alex Kerfoot.
Alexander Kerfoot. We're gonna open up that can of worms. When Kerfoot came to the Leafs, I actually liked what he provided. He's a versatile player. His best time as a Leaf came when John Tavares got injured in the playoffs in the bubble when they went up against Montreal. And Kerfoot had to step up to be the second line center. It was him, Nylander, and Alex Galchenyuk as a line. And they were really good. They were really productive. This season, I don't know. Somebody must have cursed Alexander Kerfoot's stick because he cannot score. He's getting top line minutes right now. So you will see quite a bit of Alexander Kerfoot with the way that the Leafs have been doing their lines. Sheldon Keefe said he has liked what Alex Kerfoot has brought. Unfortunately, it's not putting that puck in the net. He does bring some things defensively. He has been defensively responsible, but it's been a very. There are people who have supported Alexander Kerfoot, but there are people who thought he should have been moved at the trade deadline, and that was actually close to happening. He almost got moved in the Ryan O'Reilly trade. They were going to trade Kerfoot's salary away to make the trade work, but then Minnesota decided to eat part of O'Reilly's contract, and Kerfoot was able to stay.
Wow! You also mentioned you just said Alex Galchenyuk, who is back for this game because Lehkonen went out. They had to call somebody up. So I mean, I'm feeling Galchenyuk and Malgin double hat trick going for this game. I don't see any other way that it cannot happen. If you ask me,
I guarantee, like Galchenyuk, it was just weird because when he came to Toronto, there was no expectation for him to do anything. He was kind of just brought in to help with depth and everything, and then he carved himself out into a top six role. So that was a nice bonus for him. I think it helped him land another contract. Some people question whether he should have left the Leafs, but some people didn't want him around after he had the brutal overtime giveaway that led to a 2-0 and Montreal scoring in overtime. So there was some of those that felt like that was just a hockey god saying, let Alex Galchenyuk go to another team. But the amount of connections between Toronto and Colorado, it's actually funny. Actually always quite funny. It's a team that I always wanted the Leafs to emulate in some ways, just because, especially last season with the success the team had. I thought there was some parallels in how both teams were constructed and how they play in a sort of way. Minus the Cale Makar on defense. That's I would say the big difference between the two teams. But if there was a blueprint for the Leafs to follow, it is the Colorado Avalanche in a way.
Yeah, especially when it comes to going out and how you handle the net and how you're making your moves. How the front office is run between the two teams. You see the parallels a lot. Not necessarily when it came to the trade deadline this year, because the Avalanche kind of handled it as a reunion tour, and the Leafs kind of just flipped up their entire team and just, filled it in how they wanted. But the Avalanche just kind of brought back like Nieto and Jack Johnson just because, hey, you had time here. Come on back.
Yeah.
I was very surprised actually by the Avalanche. I thought they would have been a little more aggressive at the deadline just because I still think that they're the top team in the West. I know that it's been a slow crawl, but how many injuries the team has been dealing with Landeskog being out and now Lehkonen being out. Like I thought maybe that Joe Sakic and company would try to do a little bit more to shore up the depth in some ways. And I saw some of the moves. I'm just like, is the team just kind of like, we feel good about the guys we have and we're not going to tinker with that too much? Yeah. Or what do you think? What was kind of the plan there?
Kyle and I were talking, we said it, like we were not expecting bold moves for a couple of reasons. One, I think they just feel like if we can get this team 100% healthy, we're fine. And we'll add a couple depth pieces here and there, which is exactly what they did. And now it's just a waiting game of getting Landeskog back and even Eric Johnson back. And who else? Josh Manson is again hurt again. It's this revolving door. So in one aspect, it's like, yeah, that's right. If you have all those guys back, you're obviously a much better team. But the way this year has gone, it's just this revolving door of injuries. So what is leading you to believe that you're going to be healthy? And look what just happened. Artturi Lehkonen, we believe he broke his finger on an Avalanche goal. On that's how this season is going, is he redirected a puck that went off his hand that scored a goal and broke his finger in the process, is now out of 4 to 6 weeks.
See, the Leafs are kind of hoping that at least if Ryan O'Reilly was going to block a shot with his finger, it would go in the net. So you guys at least have that going.
We got that going for it.
Yeah. Ryan O'Reilly wasn't that fortunate. He actually turned into the shot too. That's what also made it such a painful one for the Leafs. But yeah, I just feel like that's what, because the West feels like it's so wide open in comparison to the East. I feel like the Leafs didn't want to say they were reacting to what was happening in the East, but at the same time, I feel like they were reacting to what was happening in the East with all the deals they were making. They want to be more competitive at almost every part of the lineup.
And see, the other half of that conservative approach to the deadline, the Avalanche won the cup last year. They're not trying. There's not a desperation to get that cup this year, because next year, the Avalanche are looking at contracts they need to re-sign and how this team's going to be structured. And making those big moves at the deadline requires money that the Avalanche really don't have. And you have to look at your roster with a little bit of a tilt. Like, if this team is healthy, we can win, but let's not go crazy here and try and chase this cup and really jeopardize this year. Because you mentioned with Dallas being in the top of the Central, they're not that scary. You're not staring down Boston or Carolina here. Dallas is something you could take on. So you want to extend that window of being a cup contending team for a couple years. You don't want to constantly flip the team and keep chasing that goal that you already achieved last year.
And they really didn't have the capital to really make some big moves. And that the first round pick, some people were saying, yeah, of course that could have been on the table. They didn't have one last year. And at the trade deadline last year, they were set on not giving up next year's, which is this year's, first round pick. And they landed all those players. They got Manson, they got Lehkonen in the deals, and they didn't have to give up the first round pick. So I in my head, I'm like, if they weren't going to give it up last year, what is going to make them give it up this year? They wanted to hold on to it for a reason. It's a deep draft. They want to be a part of it. They didn't have the first round pick because they gave it to Arizona for Darcy Kemper, which they had to do. They needed a goalie after, what's his name left for Seattle.
Grubauer.
Those we don't speak of.
Yeah.
So it just made sense why they didn't really go for the big move. And on the flip side, I'm curious about like the Leafs, because it seemed like every day they were making deals. And what's the feel like? Are Leafs fans happy? Is like, was it too much? Is too much a bad thing? Like when you're flipping so many guys to bring in new guys and have to learn the system, and sometimes that takes some time. Of course, you have enough time before the playoffs are here. But what's the concern? And did they do it to keep up with everything that was going on in the East Coast?
So the funny thing is, like, they made the Ryan O'Reilly trade so early, like it was like a good few weeks before the deadline, that some were wondering, oh, like, is this Kyle Dubas trying to get ahead of everybody and make that big splash? And then he goes ahead and he gets Jake McCabe and Sam Lafferty from the Blackhawks, which was an even bigger deal because both players, they weren't rentals. They're going to be here for the next. Lafferty's here for another year. McCabe's on for another 2 years. And we're like, okay, that's a decent two trades that really bolster areas that the Leafs need to get done. And then I was working the day that they brought it, that literally within a span of an hour, they trade Rasmus Sandin to the Capitals, and they get a first round pick back and Eric Gustafsson. That was like a And then all of a sudden, Pierre Engvall gets traded to the Islanders for a pick, and we're like, and then Luke Shen comes to town within like an hour span, and we're just like it was like a shock to the system because we had never, like, Kyle Dubas has made deals, but he has never gone out and done that.
Yeah,
where he just completely changes the whole makeup of the blue line within an hour span, like within that time, and it just made it realize the urgency that the Leafs have to try to win. I don't know if it's necessarily what the East is doing, but the urgency and the fact that they need to do whatever they can to try to win because Matthews' contract is going to be up soon. Nylander's contract is going to be up soon. Tavares and Marner. Like, it's not like they have these guys signed for the next 5, 6, 7 years. There's a shorter window here to try to get this stuff done. And Kyle Dubas doesn't have a contract next year. Sheldon Keefe doesn't have a contract next year. These guys have to prove that they are capable of, you know what, we're going to go for it. Tampa's done it before, and I feel like the Leafs were copying a little bit of what Tampa's doing in the past, which was we're going to make these moves. Yes, it's going to hurt us a little bit in the short term with our draft capital, but so we're going to hopefully try to make a run of it, not just this year, but also next year on top of that.
Is there a world in which Kyle Dubas returns and Sheldon Keefe doesn't? Because they're kind of like a package deal, those two, right?
Yeah, that's always been a big one. It's what basically Brandon Shanahan has backed whatever Kyle Dubas has done. He was the one that went and made the pitch for Mike Babcock in the first place, and he had to go out and fire him because there was obviously a rift between Babcock and Dubas because Dubas, came after the fact. And so I think Sheldon Keefe will, when it comes to his relationship with Kyle Dubas, I wonder if Brandon Shanahan gives Kyle Dubas that ultimatum, which is,
your job is on the line. Like, if you don't do this,
exactly,
you're both gone.
Right?
Wow.
I do think that could be a possibility because Sheldon Keefe has had, his first few years were very difficult because he had to deal with the pandemic. He had to deal with a lot of those things. But this is the best Leafs roster you could have assembled in a really long time. A lot of people were saying this. If Sheldon Keefe can't get this group to the next level, I don't see him sticking around.
And that's why I asked the question, because, like, how can you put this on Kyle Dubas? He's done everything that you want a GM to do to go get what they need to get. You made the team better. Now it's on the players and the coaches. So I don't see how you can really get rid of Kyle Dubas unless you just wanted a culture change. It's the only reason why I feel like you'd get rid of both of them.
Yeah, no, I think there's such a divide. There's what we call the Dubas apologists and the Dubas haters. And I'm kind of in the, I know. I'm in the middle here where I love the fact that every time he sees that there's an area of need this team needs, he goes and he fills it. Yeah. They need a backup goaltender. Let's go get Jack Campbell while we still have Frederik Andersen. Then Jack Campbell becomes a starting goaltender for next to nothing. And, he realizes, all right, we need to go and get a centerman. Let's go get John Tavares. Like, the Leafs have never been as aggressive as a team over the last few years than what Kyle Dubas has done. Yeah, there are certain players that he has been married to that have hurt this team, like a Justin Hall. Like, if Justin Hall is in this playoff lineup and the Leafs lose and he is on the bad end of a goal and stuff like that, that's a kind of thing I feel like could cost Sheldon Keefe and Kyle Dubas their jobs. Because they stuck behind certain players that they felt like could help this team win and have come up and just not really done that. So I feel like that's the only case where we could see those guys get let go. But Kyle Dubas has done whatever he could to get this team over the hump. Some say, oh, he sacrificed the future. So not all too much. He kept the top prospects. He kept certain, he traded a lot of draft picks, but he kept the important pieces of this core around. It's hard to fault what he has done.
And it's almost like if they do fire him, he left the next guy.
Yeah.
Good luck, dude. Whoever you are.
Exactly.
You go to their cap friendly page, there's a lot of red on that cap friendly page which signifies unrestricted free agents. So they got some maneuvering to do. It's going to be fun to watch, if you ask me. So
Oh, definitely. Brandon Shanahan is going to have himself, like, if the Leafs don't get out of the first round, Brandon Shanahan is going to have the worst job in the NHL and trying to figure out what exactly he is going to do with this team.
Yeah. All right. Let's hear from Built Bar. And then before we're going to get to predictions and stuff like that. But I do have maybe the biggest question. I'm sure you've talked about it ad nauseum on Locked On Leafs. And that is that contract that is just hanging over the Leafs. The next contract of Austin Matthews. We'll talk about that. But first, Built Bar. If you are looking for a delicious treat but don't want all the fat and calories, then you have got to try a Built Bar. We are well into the new year, and maybe some New Year's resolutions have fallen by the wayside, but you can get back on that health horse with Built Bar. And what makes Built Bar so good? For starters, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. You heard me right, real chocolate, and they come in unbelievably delicious flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. And, Built Bars not only are good for you, they taste like a candy bar, believe it or not. And they have 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and a whopping 17 grams of protein. And for as long as we've been talking about Built Bar, we always say you can go to built.com to put your order in, which you still can do. But if you want these delicious protein bars now, then you can go to your local Walmart or Sam's Club and take them right off of the shelf. So you can still go to built.com or Sam's Club or Walmart. Get a 13-bar box of their hit flavors, brownie batter and churro. The deliciousness just never ends. You can thank us later for that. All right, sir. So let's get to, before we get to predictions for this game. I love the offseason as much as the regular season. I love just wheeling and dealing and free agents and signings and all that stuff. I love seeing, in another life, I was a GM that knows nothing about it. But the Austin Matthews one is going to be fascinating. That is going to be like, LeBron James taking my talents to South Beach, like an off season. And for, once the season is over, Nathan MacKinnon then becomes the highest paid player in the league. I don't think that's going to last too long because for a number of reasons. One, during next year, that's Austin Matthews' final year of this deal that he's in. And you would have to think that after that year, the cap is going to go up. And not only that, the Leafs are and other teams are going to be prepared to throw kind of ungodly money at him. So a lot of people were thinking for Nathan MacKinnon, would the Avalanche go to $13-14 million for him? I wasn't going that high. I was going up to 13. I would have gone that high. And they got to 12.6. All right. So they approached that. I think Matthews, because of the reasons I kind of just said, is going to, overcome that amount. Is this a done thing? Like, are you confident he is remaining with the Leafs, or in the back of your head, are you feeling like there is going to be a team that just throws everything at him? And could that team be Arizona? How tied to home is he?
I was waiting for that. I was waiting for the Arizona thing because somebody at one point, there was a Toronto media member that brought up a doomsday clock for Austin Matthews. Went to Arizona.
Are they going to build that with the whole new arena?
So is Austin Matthews going to have to pay for that new arena in Arizona with that brand new deal that he's going to get? So when the Leafs approached Austin Matthews with a contract extension, when he initially signed his deal in 2019, They wanted to get 8 years from Austin Matthews. They only got 5. And the reason why they only got 5 was because Austin Matthews started, apparently, according to Elliot Friedman, that number was closer to 14 when they went for that 8-year deal. Because Austin Matthews, like some smart and like a smart athlete would do, I feel like more NHL players should do this, realizing that the cap is going to go up. Which, well, I mean, this was pre-pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic. We didn't realize a flat cap was coming, but the cap will eventually go up. So he's realizing that player salaries are going to go up. So why limit myself now with an 8-year deal where in a few years, 5 years,
Smart.
I can go and I can reload, right, and try to get another crack at it. And I'm now saying that number of 14 might be exactly where the starting point will be on a new deal. He's never once have complained about being in Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's ever been an issue for him. You know, the marketing opportunities, the money he is making on the offside of because he is a star in Toronto. I think that has made him realize that it doesn't make sense for him to leave. The team is still good. He stays, the team is still going to be good. It's very similar to the Nathan McKinnon situation in that regard when it comes to the roster. When I look at where would he go, I don't see him going to a small market because he doesn't play like a small market player. He doesn't come across as a small market player. He wants to be embraced as that big star. And how many teams will be able to really offer that to him? Somebody brought up the New York Rangers. Yeah, potentially. I don't know what their cap situation is going to be like, but that's a team. Like if there's a team I'm worried about, it could be New York and it could be LA.
Yeah.
Because those are the two big
markets
that can offer Austin Matthews the world and then some on top of what he is making as a hockey player. But I also think the Leafs, when they did all their moves, when they do their contracts, they're not putting themselves in a situation where now we can't afford Austin Matthews.
Right.
You know, there's kind of a strategy there in that regard. Some Leaf fans are also wondering, do they leave themselves a potential window where if maybe Austin Matthews isn't on the table, is Connor McDavid on the table? You know,
whoa,
right? There's been that thought process of Connor McDavid. There's some thought that maybe he wasn't happy that Toronto didn't get him because they were within that lottery range that the Oilers were. But I think Austin Matthews, what he means to this team, what he has done for this team ever since he came here, handling the pressure of being the first round pick in Toronto. Like there's a reason why a lot of Leafs fans are worried because the Leafs have not had a star of Austin Matthews quality in a really long time.
No.
And to lose that to another team and just for nothing as well, that would be like catastrophic, not just for the Leafs, I think for the league in that regard, to not have a premier star player on a premier market like Toronto.
That's true.
Yeah, that's something that Connor McDavid filling in the absence and Austin Matthews going to LA scenario is something I've heard a couple of places, and the more you think about it, Toronto, with everything going on this season, you're going to really have to sit Austin Matthews down and really have to make a lot of promises that you are going to get a cup here, and I will show you how, because he could find that with a couple. LA's already they have their leg up on rebuilding and putting a team together, and they can make a sales pitch a lot quicker. And we were talking, Chris brought up all the red of the UFAs that are coming up for the Leafs. You're really going to have to put together a really good sales pitch. Like, I know it's comfort, it's home, Justin Bieber, the whole 9 yards, but LA, you could get that too. And my goodness, you can. The NHL wants America, like the United States, to really have a face of hockey, and they will put him all over ESPN in LA and have a field day with Austin Matthews in a King sweater.
I agree with you, Kyle. Like I I bring up I bring up Arizona because you're going to hear that nonstop. I think Arizona is a couple years behind in, like, if it was the perfect storm of this massive arena and this city that we're going to build, if that was finished the year that was, his free agency offseason, then you can throw that at him and be like, we built this for you, basically, and come here. But the LA thing I think is going to be intriguing because you don't have to go completely home.
Yeah.
If that pulls on you, you can go close to home. LA is close to Arizona. I wasn't that great in history, but I know where those two things are on the map, and they're pretty close to each other.
Yeah.
So that maybe does make some sense if he wanted to go home, like kind of, like the whole Johnny Hockey thing where, he wanted to get at Calgary and he's not home, but he's closer and he's happy about that. So I'll say this though. I don't think he's going anywhere. I think everything that you laid out, David, is exactly like why he stays. And I feel like he's one of those guys like Sidney Crosby, like Nathan McKinnon is becoming, being loyal to the team that drafted you and put everything behind you to be what you've become. So I feel like there's like loyalty there. Maybe the Arizona/LA thing happens in the end when he's got a couple years left and he just goes home and, throws on a Coyotes jersey to help the home team out. Maybe that happens, but I think he's cashing in right where he's at.
And I'll say this too about you talked about guys wanting to stay in Toronto. Like John Tavares, if you think John Tavares' next contract is going to be in the double digits, he's going to stay with Toronto, I think, for the rest of his career. He's come home. He loves it. His family's here. I don't see how he doesn't take the discount. Now, he's not going to do what Mark Giordano did and take $800,000. But I do think if it's Kyle Dubas at that point tells him, we want to build and we want to make sure that this team can stay together, John Tavares will take less money to do it. I think he will do that. He's now made his big contract. He's been the big free agent. Now it's all about for him to win a cup. That's what he wants to do now. So, and the only other player I would be worried about is Mitch Marner because he wanted to be paid like Austin Matthews and John Tavares. He didn't want to get left behind. His contract will be done the year after Matthews is done. So that's two headaches in a row for the league. That's something that has to be on the back of the minds of Leafs manager when they consider the Austin Matthews deal, because what Austin Matthews gets, Mitch Marner won't be too far behind because that's exactly what happened the last time. The difference is obviously Mitch Marner is going to be a UFA. So if the Leafs may want to go the route of saying, this is what we can offer you. We want to make sure that this team can remain a contender. If Marner is so much married to staying in Toronto, he'll try to make it work. If not, they might have to be that decision of, is it Matthews or is it Marner? And that's something that could be. I've never ever said that before. This is the first time I've mentioned that.
Oh,
and it's something that has been in the back of my mind. So
exclusive here on Locked On Avs, Locked On Leafs. All right, definitely a team to watch. Always, because like I said, like they are the New York Yankees of hockey. So you always have to have eyes on what's going on in Toronto. So, and quickly before we get to prediction, do you think if the league expanded, another team would be in Toronto?
No. The Leafs will definitely not want. There was that thought process back when Markham, which is just outside of Toronto, could potentially have an NHL arena. I just don't know how another team will do trying to compete against the Toronto Maple Leafs for marketing dollars and for all those things. I don't see it happening. If a team does not go to Quebec City first before a second team comes to Toronto, that would be a big mistake. Quebec has the arena. I guarantee they can find an ownership group that will take a team there. If it happens in Toronto, I will be so surprised because I just don't see how you could compete with Toronto for those marketing dollars.
Tough. Definitely tough. So, all right. We'll swing back around, come full circle, and talk about this game between the Avalanche and the Leafs. What do we think? Let's throw out some predictions. I don't know. I guess I'll throw my hat in the ring right off the bat. Rip the Band-Aid off. Dude, like it's so. Kyle and I say it all. I've been saying it for the duration of the season. It's been so up and down. And when you think the Avalanche have righted the ship, then they come with a 4-game losing streak. So yeah, you feel good about what the Avs did against the Canadiens, But I keep going back to it's the Canadiens. They just did this against the Sharks, and it's like that's the Sharks. You should be kind of decimating those teams. I think this is going to be a fun game, an enjoyable game. The Avalanche at least are starting to score now. Like they went through a rough patch where they were losing games and struggling to score, but they are scoring. So I feel like this is going to be a relatively high scoring game. And Georgiev hasn't been on his best games as of late. But even having said that, I think this is always tough. When you're going into Toronto, you just always feel like this is going to be tough. So I'll kind of split the difference here and say like this will go to overtime. So at least the Avalanche can get a point. But I feel like it'll be a 5-4 Leafs win in overtime. That's what I'm going to say. Go ahead, Kyle. What are you thinking?
All right, here we go. This is going to be a 5-3 Avalanche win. Ooh. Off of it's going to be 4-3 deep in the third. Pull the goalie. The Avalanche are going to get lucky, get the puck, net that empty netter 5-3. But I feel like it's going to be one of those. The Avalanche get out early, Toronto matches, and then it'll be Cale Makar getting that game-winning goal.
Oh, okay. It's not bad. It honestly will depend on who's in net for the Leafs too, because Samsonov wasn't 100%. He didn't start the last game. He is a much better goaltender at home. So if it's Samsonov in net, I do think goals will be scored because the Avalanche do have that firepower. I don't know if it's going to be that many goals. But if it's Matt Murray, 4 goals has kind of been the pattern for him since he's come back from his injury. So I'm going to go with they're coming off that tough loss against Buffalo. I think they're going to try
another reason why they might be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think
go ahead.
And a good team. They're going to try. This is a measuring stick game for the Leafs. I'm going to reverse Kyle's score. I'm going to say the Leafs will win this one 5-3 in a similar kind of result.
Okay. So we got one outright Av win, one outright Leaf win, and I'm going overtime. So nobody kills me. All right. So that'll wrap it up. This is going to be a fun one. I always like when they go up against Toronto. So David, thank you for doing this. And we'll have to do it again because you are actually one half of Locked On Leafs, but your partner in crime is away on a vacation right now. So
yeah, he's going to be kicking himself that he loves doing the crossovers. He'll be kicking himself a little bit that he missed this one.
You know what? Then we should never do one again. So he missed out on his one and only opportunity.
That's it. No. Doors closed.
Yeah.
Hey, maybe in the Stanley Cup final.
Oh, hey now. I'm going to leave it at that. All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in, making it your first listen of the day. That's always appreciated. From Locked On Leafs, David Morassutti. I am Chris Maselli, and he is Mr. Shaggy Von Doom. Kyle Sullivan from Locked On Avalanche. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Enjoy the game. We'll see you guys tomorrow.